Saint-Chamond, Loire Valley, France. The Creuse Loire assembly plant. A vehicle emerges from the factory doors into morning fog. 4 wheels, a boxy steel hull rising almost vertically from the chassis. Flat nose, narrow windscreen slits. A ring-mounted machine gun. No turret, no tracks, no sloped armor. Nothing resembling the sophisticated infantry carriers NATO armies were fielding that year. It stands barely 2 meters tall. It weighs 13 tons. French army officers watching from the factory floor had a word for it. A camel. Le chameau. A beast of burden. Not a warhorse. They were right about the first part. They were catastrophically wrong about everything else. That vehicle would deploy to Lebanon while Beirut burned. It would cross the Sahara in Chad for 28 consecutive years. It would spearhead the coalition left flank in the Gulf War. It would hold a bridge in Sarajevo under sniper fire. It would absorb ambushes in the Afghan mountains. It would drive mine-seeded tracks across Mali. And in March 2026, nearly 50 years after the first one rolled off this production line, the French government would load 39 of them onto transport ships and deliver them to the Lebanese armed forces at the port of Beirut. Its designation was the Véhicule de l'Avant Blindé, the VAB. It would be exported to more than 40 nations, built in approximately 5,000 examples. It would outlive the tracked vehicle designed to replace it. It would outlive every Western rival in its weight class, and it remains in frontline service with Ukrainian forces in the Donbas as of this recording. To understand why this vehicle existed at all, you need to understand the problem France faced in 1970. The Warsaw Pact's 1968 intervention in Czechoslovakia had moved 250,000 Soviet and Allied troops across 3 national borders in under 4 days. French defense planners examined their own mechanized capacity and identified a gap they could not ignore. The heavy divisions had their tracked AMX-10P infantry fighting vehicles entering service. Those could fight alongside main battle tanks in high-intensity armored warfare. But the second echelon infantry, the rapid reaction brigades, the marine regiments, the support companies, all of them were still moving in unarmored trucks. A single burst from a heavy machine gun could eliminate an entire section before they ever reached their dismount point. In 1970, Defense Minister Michel Debré launched a competitive development program. The requirement was written in direct terms. The vehicle had to be fully amphibious. Western Germany and eastern France were crossed by hundreds of rivers and canals. The army could not depend on engineers being available at every water crossing during a rapid advance. It had to carry 10 fully equipped soldiers. It had to protect against small arms fire and artillery fragments. And critically, it had to be simple enough to maintain with commercial spare parts. No expeditionary force could sustain a vehicle that required factory specialists to repair a transmission failure in the field. 3 manufacturers responded. Berliet submitted a prototype. Panhard submitted the M4. Savium, the heavy vehicle subsidiary of Renault, submitted 5 prototypes in total. 3 were 4-wheel drive configurations. 2 were 6-wheeled. Comparative trials ran through 1973. Savium was confirmed as prime contractor in May 1974. Creuse Loire, at Saint-Chamond, was contracted to build and weld the armoured hull. First deliveries went to the 1st Infantry Regiment in 1976. The Panhard M4 was rejected. The choice was wheeled, not tracked. Simple, not sophisticated. Critics called the decision a shortcut. That shortcut would define the next 50 years of French military operations. The vehicle itself was a study in deliberate restraint. 13 tons combat loaded, light enough for a single Transall C-160 transport aircraft to carry 1, light enough for an Airbus A400M to carry 2. The hull measured just under 6 meters in length, 2.49 meters in width. Narrow enough to navigate European roads without special movement permits. Small enough to reverse down an unlit Sahel track at speed without losing the edge. The 2-man crew sat up front. Driver on the left, gunner on the right. Behind heated bulletproof glass with armoured shutters they could drop in under 2 seconds. Behind the engine compartment, accessed through a pair of rear doors and lateral side hatches, the troop compartment seated 10 fully equipped soldiers on inward-facing folding benches. A full infantry section ready to dismount fighting. Power came from a turbocharged inline 6-cylinder diesel engine derived from the Savium commercial truck range, initially producing 220 horsepower, later upgraded to 320 on modernized variants. Road speed reached 90 to 110 km per hour, depending on variant. Range reached 1,000 km on 310 litres of fuel. The VAB could drive itself to any potential battlefield in Western Europe without a resupply stop. In water, Twin hydrojets pushed it at 8 kilometers per hour with zero preparation required. The driver steered the vehicle into the river. The jets engaged automatically. The crew did not stop, did not dismount, did not wait for bridging equipment. They crossed. Dwake. Armament on the base variant was a 12.7mm Browning M2 heavy machine gun. That weapon could penetrate the side armor of any infantry carrier it was likely to encounter in the 1970s or 80s. But the design was engineered for adaptation. The VAB Mephisto variant carried 4 HTAR anti-tank missiles in a retractable launcher, 8 reloads stored internally. A two-man crew could engage main battle tanks at 4,000 meters. Other configurations included twin 20mm anti-aircraft cannon, an 81mm mortar firing through a roof hatch, surface-to-air Mistral missile launchers, full nuclear, biological and chemical overpressure protection fitted as standard across every variant, electronic warfare suites capable of jamming ground-to-air communications. The platform that looked like a delivery van carried anti-tank weapons that could threaten any armored vehicle in Soviet inventory. The hull geometry held one final advantage, and it was one no engineer in 1974 fully anticipated. The amphibious requirement forced designers to give the VAB a rounded, boat-shaped underbelly, angled outward at the base, so that water pressure during river crossings would be shed sideways rather than lifted against the entire floor. In 1974, that was a river crossing feature. In 2003-2008, and VABers driving the packed dirt tracks of Afghanistan and Mali hit pressure plate improvised explosive devices. That same rounded geometry scattered blast energy upward and outward, rather than channeling it through the floor into the crew compartment. The shape that made it float also made it survive wars no Cold War planner had imagined. It was the right answer to a question that had not yet been asked. Now, before we move into where this vehicle actually fought, and the men who crewed it through 5 decades of conflict, if you are finding this deep dive worthwhile, hit subscribe. It costs nothing, and it keeps this channel producing content at this depth. Benist, 1983. West Beirut, Lebanon. France was part of the multinational force attempting to stabilize a capital that had been at war since 1975. VABs of the 1st and 9th Parachute Chasseur Regiments were positioned throughout the city alongside contingents from the United States, Italy, and the United Kingdom. On October 23, 1983, a truck bomb struck the Drakkar building. 58 French paratroopers were killed. The single worst day for the French army since the Algerian War. VABs moved through streets under sniper fire to extract the wounded. They secured the perimeter. They carried the dead back through a city where no vehicle without armor survived on the roads after dark. The vehicles kept moving. VABs on Operation Epervier in Chad ran from 1986 until 2014. 28 consecutive years. France maintained an armoured presence against Libyan-backed incursions across a country larger than all of Western Europe combined. Temperatures in the Saharan north reached 45 degrees Celsius. Sand infiltrated fuel systems. Distances between any two positions could be 500 kilometers of open track with no paved road surface and no shade. The VAB ran it without breaking down in numbers that would have grounded a more complex vehicle. The commercial Renault drivetrain that critics had dismissed as beneath the dignity of a military program meant that any mechanic trained on a Renault civilian truck could repair it in the field. Parts could be flown in on a standard cargo pallet. 1991, Saudi Arabia and southern Iraq. The Division Daguet. Approximately 12,000 French soldiers deployed as the left flank of the coalition ground offensive. Approximately 376 VABs supported the advance alongside 44 AMX-30B2 main battle tanks and 100 AMX-10 RC light armoured vehicles. VAB Mephistos of the 1st Sparpies Regiment and the 1st Cavalry Tank Regiment fired approximately 60 H-Toit missiles against Iraqi armour and fortified positions during the ground offensive of February 24 to 26, 1991. The division destroyed the Iraqi 45th Mechanized Infantry Division, took between 2,500 and 3,000 prisoners, lost 5 soldiers. Not one of those losses occurred inside a VAB. The ground campaign lasted 100 hours for the French element. The Camel had fought, and it had won. May 27, 1995. The Verbanja Bridge, Sarajevo, Bosnia. Bosnian Serb forces had seized a United Nations observation post, taken 12 French soldiers hostage, fortified the position overnight with firing positions covering both bridge approaches. Captain Francois Lecointre of the 3rd Marine Infantry Regiment commanded the recovery force, 30 Marines in direct assault, 70 more in support. Armoured cars of the Marine Infantry Tank Regiment providing flanking fire, the bows positioned to suppress the bridge approaches with their roof-mounted weapons. Lieutenant Bruno Helluin led the bayonet assault on foot through the door of the post. 2 French Marines were killed. Private Jackie Humblet died at the post. Private Marcel Amaru was shot by a sniper while manning the roof gun of his VAB, covering the ground element below. All 12 hostages were recovered alive. Every prisoner was taken. Captain Lecointre received the Legion of Honor. He became Chief of the Defense Staff of France in 2017. The VAB that suppressed the bridge that night remained in French service. Afghanistan broke the confidence of the French army in the VAB's basic protection standard, and in doing so forced an evolution that proved the platform's fundamental soundness. August 18, 2008. The Udzbin Valley. Adjutant Gaetan Everard commanded the Carmin II section of the 8th Parachute Infantry Marine Regiment. 4 VABs and 31 soldiers on patrol from their forward operating base in the valley. The column drove into a prepared ambush set by approximately 140 fighters in terrain that commanded every escape route. 10 French soldiers were killed. It was the worst single-day French army loss since the Drakkar bombing 25 years earlier. 1 VAB absorbed a direct rocket-propelled grenade strike. The crew survived. The platform had not failed. The threat level had exceeded what the armor specification of 1974 was ever designed to defeat. The French army's response was not to replace the vehicle. It was to accelerate a modernization program. Within months, VAB top variants with Kongsberg remote weapon stations, stabilized sighting systems, acoustic sniper detection, and ceramic armor panels added to the hull sides were rushed into theater. A platform designed in 1970 was modified for digital counterinsurgency warfare within a single operational year. No replacement was available. Subsequent operations proved none was necessary. Manali confirmed it. January 2013. Operation Serval. Companies of the 21st Marine Infantry Regiment drove north from Bamako in VABs on the day France intervened to halt a jihadist advance toward the capital. The advance to Gao and Kidal covered hundreds of kilometers of Sahel track seeded with pressure plate devices. VABs hit mines. The boat-shaped hull deflected the blast outward. Crews survived strikes that would have killed them in flat-bottomed vehicles. The French army subsequently modernized 40 VAB ambulance variants specifically to defeat the improvised explosive device threat, a program delivered by Arquus in 2021. The amphibious geometry designed for a river crossing in Germany that never happened saved lives in a desert that no one in 1974 had imagined. On paper, the VAB's contemporaries looked more capable in every measurable category. The Soviet BTR-80 carried a closed turret with a 14.5mm cannon. It could suppress infantry positions that a ring-mounted machine gun could not reach. The American M113 had cross-country tracked mobility that 4 wheels could not match in soft ground. The German Transport Panzer I Fuchs was a 6-wheel drive platform with heavier armor and greater internal volume. The British Saxon carried stronger frontal protection than any basic VAB configuration offered. In practice, none of those advantages translated to the conflicts that were actually fought. The BTR-80 was destroyed in large numbers in Chechnya, Afghanistan, and later Ukraine, repeatedly lost to fire through its open-wheel arches and rear hatches. The M113 was retired from most Western European armies by the 2000s. The Saxon was withdrawn from British service in 2007. The Transport Panzer was used primarily for nuclear, biological, and chemical reconnaissance rather than general infantry roles. It was never exported at scale. Every one of those vehicles solved a Cold War problem that was never tested in a Cold War battle. The VAB solved the problem France was actually going to fight. Morocco fielded approximately 400. Using them in operations against Polisario forces in the Western Sahara for over 3 decades. Qatar, Oman, Cyprus, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Indonesia, Tunisia, Benin and Lebanon all operated variants of the same base platform, maintained with the same commercial Renault components, repaired by mechanics who trained on the same manual. Over 40 nations in total, the export record of a vehicle dismissed in 1974 as too simple to be taken seriously. France delivered exactly 250 VABs to Ukraine between February 2022 and December 2023. A further approximately 162 were transferred during 2024, putting the documented total at over 400. Ukrainian Air Assault Brigade crews operating them near Pokrovsk reported that the vehicle's mine blast survivability and the firepower of its M2 heavy machine gun were exceeding expectations against Russian infantry carriers. The design meant to cross the Rhine against the Red Army was now crewed by Ukrainians fighting the Red Army's successor, and in March of 2026, 39 more were handed to Lebanon at the port of Beirut, where the Drakkar building once stood. Saint-Chamond, a boxy, flat-nosed vehicle with 4 wheels and a machine gun, rolled out of a factory and was called a Camel. No integrated night vision, no composite armor in the base fit, No active protection system, no radar-absorbing treatment, a commercial diesel engine, a welded steel box, a boat-shaped belly, and a 12.7mm gun on a ring mount. It went to every war France fought, in the rubble of Beirut, in the sand of Chad, on the bridge at Vabanja, where a future chief of the defense staff directed the assault, in the ambush-choked valleys of Afghanistan, in the mine-seeded tracks north of Bamako, in the trenches of eastern Ukraine. The specification that critics in 1974 called beneath the standards of a modern army was precisely the specification that 50 years of expeditionary warfare demanded. Light enough to be airlifted in numbers, simple enough to be repaired 500 kilometers from the nearest depot, cheap enough to be built in the thousands and given away when the replacements finally came, and shaped by the accident of an amphibious requirement that was never tactically used to survive the mine and blast threats that no Cold War planner had put on a requirement sheet. 40 nations flew it. 50 years of war proved every critic wrong. That is not luck. That is engineering that understood what fighting actually looks like.